Hey guys, for this week's episode of Behind the Animation, I'm going to show you a tutorial of Flipaclip. So I'm on my iPad, just so that I can show you the tools better on a wider screen. The ratio isn't quite right, but I think it will be fine. Okay, so once you've downloaded Flipaclip, which you can get in the App Store, I think it's Android and iPhone accessible, you want to click that big plus at the bottom. And it will get you to name your animation. I'm just going to name it tutorial, and then you can pick your format, or you can pick your frames per second, but you need premium to change your format. And let's go into create project. Now you'll get a blank screen with the pens. This all white isn't quite white, so to fix that, you press the three dots up here, you go into project settings, you go into the bucket tool, you select white, and then you click save changes. So these are the pens, and there was a recent update which meant we have more pens now. There's the pen brush, the pencil tool, the brush tool, the highlighter tool, which is always at a lower opacity, the crayon tool, which I haven't used before, the airbrush tool, and the sketch tool, which I use quite a lot on the iPad. As you can see, they vary a lot, and this really helps you get your techniques and the stages of animation, which actually is a previous video of mine. So the airbrush is quite helpful if you want small details or you want a texture effect. The sketch brush and the pencil brush are for sketches. Brush you probably aren't going to use, but it is good if you want to do watercolour art. I'd recommend doing that on something like Ibis Paint or Procreate though. The pen tool is great for fine lining. The highlighter can show highlights. It's not the best tool though for that. And the crayon's good for sketching if you don't like the already existing sketching pencils. This is the eraser tool. I can change the opacity with this. I can change the colour, but I don't know what that's going to do. And I changed the thickness like this. This is also how you use the pens. So I can erase, or I can use the lasso tool to select and delete. Then we had the bucket tool. I can then fill in the entire canvas, or I can go onto the pen tool and I can draw these rocks, not very good rocks, and then I can go with a dark grey, and as long as I've filled them in, I can fill these in. I just have to make sure the lines touch. It's much more sensitive than apps like Ibis Paint, so you've got to be careful. And if you do the fine lining on a different layer to your colour, let me show you, like here. So I'm doing the rocks on a different layer, but when I try and go into colour, it will fill the entire layer. So it doesn't look at other layers. So in this situation, I would probably bucket tool this, the blue, and then go into the grey with the pen tool. Also, another thing to note is that when you're adding colours to the bucket, it doesn't move across to the pen, so you've got to add the colours the same. So for example, this does have the eyedropper tool, so you can, if you're using the bucket, you can bucket that down, and then I'll be able to eyedropper that. So I'm just going to show you how you can. I'm just going to draw a frame so I can continue. So I'm just going to be drawing a ripple effect. So I just draw this first, and then I'll use the bucket tool to get a nice blue for water. And then I'll use the airbrush tool to get some shadows. And then if I want to keep all this on the same, there's a few ways I can do it. One way to add a new frame is to press this plus button. You can press that or the arrows to put it on different directions, because you can't move frames around. So like if I hold this, it won't go over there. Or I can copy, pressing that, and paste. Or I can just go onto a new layer and press this button up here to copy, and this button to paste. Then I'd add details, some more details, like this, and then I copy that and paste it onto here, and then do this, and then I can watch my animation. It's not very good. Now, if you want to make that look a little nicer, you can turn the frames per second down, or you can turn the frames per second up. It's basically, if you don't know what frames per second means, it's basically the speed of each frame. So it would take 30 frames to make 1 second in 30 FPS. So each frame would be a 30th of a second. In 1 FPS, each frame would be 1 second. I'd recommend using 12 to 14 FPS once you start off. The default FPS is 12 frames per second. Sometimes it will save at 14 frames per second, but that's an error and it was supposed to be fixed. And here is the audio tool. You can add stuff from the audio library. You can use it with the microphone, or you can import, but that's premium, so you have to watch an ad to do that. If you press these buttons, you can go into your frame viewer. This is helpful if you're doing a bigger animation that has 100 or 200 frames. This is a grid, and same as with Ibis Paint, it can be helpful to get proportions. I usually don't use grids. Here you turn your onion frames on, which basically means when you do a circle, you can see the circle on the next frame and use it to make a better circle. Although it's usually just used for reference to make sure your animation doesn't start looking like that. If you're moving something, if you're animating quite a few things, I would recommend just using copy and paste. But some people say that's quite a lazy way of doing things, it's not traditional. And then you can import images from a camera, photo library or file, and you can do the same with videos, but that's premium, so you have to watch an ad. Here is the grid tools. You can it helps you draw a straight line. You can draw a circle of any size, or you can turn it into an ellipsis. And you can draw a square. I've never had to use a square tool, all depends on what you're going to be using your animations for. And it can be quite useful if you're trying to draw, well, if you've got a shaky hand. Another way to solve shaky hand is you can change the stabilizer. Although max stabilizer does feel a little weird, because even if you're intentionally trying to draw a slightly shakier line, it won't let you. So I usually keep it about 50%. But it all comes down to your ability and how shaky your hand is. You'll be able to use less of the stabilizer with practice. And then there's a text tool. You can change your font. So I'm just going to use this. You can change the size, and then I think you can just import. I haven't used text tool before. There, you press that. Let's just put OK. We insert that, and then you've got that. You now have some text. OK equals. This can be helpful if you're not very good at drawing letters freehand or numbers, and then you can just copy and paste this onto a new frame, and then you can animate it. So one way I could do this, I could use these tools, is to make an enlarging animation. You can use an editing afterwards, but it is quite fun to do in animation. So there I've just made it enlarge a little bit. It's a little choppy. That's where onion frames, if you use them, can help you. And project settings, I think that's everything. Yeah, with the background, you can change this, change the frames per second, change the colour of your background. You can even choose a picture. And then, actually, one thing that took me a little while to find is the undo and redo tools, and they're quite helpful if you make a mistake. And then I forgot to mention when I talked about layers. You can change the opacity of a layer. So let's say I go onto this. I bucket. I can then change the opacity. I can turn on a glow. I can change the size. Change settings for the glow, and I can change the colour. And everything I draw on that layer should, well, not everything, but the outline of the layer should have a glow. So let's just get rid of everything, and I can demonstrate it a little better. So like that, it has a nice glow, and that's 50% opacity. And then if you make a mistake, or you want to delete a layer, which, warning, it will delete on every frame, you just slide to the side, and you can... Okay, these are premium layers. These are premium. You can lock the layer so that you can no longer draw on it. You slide to the side. It's not letting me... Okay, then you want to press it there, then you can delete the layer. And then you can add a layer. Without premium, you can only have 3 layers at a time. You can watch now to get new layers, but it's not the best. And then there you go. You can start animating. I'm sorry if I didn't make much sense. There are better tutorials out there, but this is just my take and how I try and explain it. Next week's episode, I will be doing an animate with you, where I will be animating a ball. Much like in the frames per second, it's a great activity for your first animation, and it helps you to get used to things. If you're able to upload on your channel, I'd love for you to send those animations to me, and I can have a look. You can also send them over my Discord. I'll send a link to the fan server in the video description probably. And yeah, that's all.